Morning, guys. So today we will look at instruction pipeline design. Okay, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. So we will start with instruction pipeline design. In the previous two classes, we saw linear pipelining and non-linear pipelining. Right, in linear pipeline there is only one way, one flow. The flow goes from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 2 to stage 3, and then it just goes to the last stage. But in non-linear pipeline, in addition to this, you have feed forward system and feedback system. Okay, so in feed forward you can actually jump from stage 1 to stage 3, or stage 1 to stage 4. And in feedback system you have feedback going, like meaning stage 4 to stage 2 or something like that. Okay, so you can have all these combinations in your non-linear pipeline. Now let us look at the instruction pipeline design. So we will focus on how the instructions are pipeline. The focus will be more on the instruction part, how they are going to be issued and so on. Okay, so in today's class, basically your instruction has several phases. So that's the entire idea about pipeline, right? So all you're trying to do is you're trying to divide the entire execution into different phases or stages, just like how we divided the laundry into different stages, right? One for washing, one for drying, one for actually folding, and then one is to store into the wardrobe. Now, similarly, here also you have different stages. So the stages in your instruction pipeline are your fetch, decode, issue, execute, and write back. And this is completely architecture dependent. You can actually have different variations of this. So in this book, we are going to deal with this, right? So for our curriculum, we are going to focus on this particular architecture where you have fetch, decode, issue, execute, and write back. So what happens in fetch? In fetch, you actually fetch the instruction, as simple as that. Okay, so your set of instructions, your program, the moment when you do dot slash a dot out, or when you click execute, what happens? You actually bring your binary into your memory, and then your PC will start reading these instructions from memory, and then just execute. CPU will execute, right? So that's what you do in fetch. In fetch, what you do is you take the next instruction, whatever is pointed by PC, you actually fetch that from your memory and bring it to your CPU. Okay, that's all. There is no other intelligence there. Okay, it is simply fetching. In decode, you are going to decode the instruction as the name suggests, right? So you're going to interpret it. What instruction is this? I've just fetched blindly. I've fetched one instruction. What instruction is this? Is it a load instruction? Is it an add instruction? So I need to know, like, whom I have to make ready, right? So the decode takes care of that. It actually tries to find out what this instruction is referring to. And next you have issue, and this is a very important stage. So what you have here is you are going to, so let us say you are going to have an add instruction, right? So then what do you have to do? You have to issue this instruction to the adder in the ALU. Okay, you have to say, hey adder, you have a job to do now. Okay, meanwhile the multiplier can relax, correct? So issue stage takes care of that. If it is a load, then you have to make sure that the load unit is actually doing the work. Meanwhile adder or multiplier can relax. Okay, so that's what in issue does. And the actual execution takes place in execute cycle. Okay, if you are doing add a comma b comma c, then your actual addition takes place, the actual addition takes place only in the execute cycle. And after you executed, what is there? You have to write back the result to the register. So you have a register file, and you have to write back. Okay, simply adder computing the result will not do. Adder has to report the result back, and it will report it back to a register, and that is your write back stage. So with this, right, So this is what we have seen. So you have fetch, you have decode, and then issue, execute, and then write back. Now execute stage, not only execute stage, few other stages also, right? They can actually take more than one cycle. Okay. Now, if especially if you take multiplication, right? Multiplication cannot be done in just single cycle. It's actually a very long process. Okay, you have to shift and add, right? So based on that, you actually divide the execute stage into multiple sub stages. This is also possible. Okay. Now this example, what does it show? This is a linear pipeline, correct? So we just have from one stage to the other stage. So we have a very simple pipeline here. Okay. Now here there are two ways you can actually divide the execution of instructions. So one is by issuing it in program order. You will stick to your program order, or you can do some shuffling. Okay, you can do some reordering and then you can execute. Okay, so there are two ways to do this. We will see it in a bit. Now, for the rest of the for the rest of the topic, right? Like not exactly today, but then we will be seeing in the subsequent topics. So we will be seeing what are the different design issues for the pipeline. Okay, so we'll see some of it in this class and some of it in the next classes. Prefetch buffers, multiple functional units, data forwarding, hazard avoidance, and you have dynamic scheduling. Okay, we saw the dynamic pipeline earlier, but now we will see what is dynamic scheduling. And then you have branch handling techniques. Okay, so how do you handle branches? Branches are very important part of your program. Okay, and they cause a lot of problem. Okay, so we have to deal with them in a special way. Okay, so this is a brief overview of what the instruction pipeline is going to look like, right? What we are going to deal with. Now, we just saw two things, right? So one is in order issue and then out of order or reordered issue. So we will take one example, a very simple example: x equals to y plus z, and then a equals to b times c. Okay, so now if these are just two lines in your high level program. Now if you convert this to a machine equivalent, right, a machine readable sequence, it's going to look like this: r1. So what you're going to do is you're first going to load your y is your memory location, right? So from your memory location y, you're going to bring in and then you're going to load it in r1 register. Okay, and then you're going to bring in z from from memory and into r2. And then what you're going to do, you're going to do the addition is r3 equals to r1 plus r2. Okay, the content of r1 plus content of r2, you're going to have it in r3. Okay, and what do you have to do? You need the result not in r3, you need the result in x is another memory location. So what you're going to do, you have to store. Okay, you're going to store r3 into the location x. Okay, a simple x equals to y plus z consists of these many instructions. Okay, and this is more of a RISC like architecture. So we are going to have the loading into register and then operation in the register. Okay, so this is more of a RISC architecture. And similarly, if you want to do it for this b equals a equals to b times c, this is going to look like this. Okay, now what do we understand from here? So we've actually read about dependencies, right? Can somebody point out if there is any dependency in this sequence? Let's pick somebody. Somebody. Govindaraju? Priya? Hey, Govindaraju. Can you just point if there are any dependencies here? Govindaraju, can you unmute? Hey guys, I don't think we should be spending so much time in this kind of communication. Okay. All right. Who else? Priya. Priya, can you please unmute? Can you just type the answer, Govindaraju? I asked a question, right? Priya, Pavitra, Sindhu, Sindhu J, Sindhu R, Saurabh, Shrikanta.
Yes, sir.
Hey Shrikanta, can you just
Yes,
help us with identifying any dependencies that are here?
sir. I think both are different, sir. Both are independent. I think so. Like R1, R2, R3 doesn't depend on R4, R5, R6.
Yeah, sure. That's true. That's correct. That's a very good observation.
And for R3, like third instruction to be executed, first two memory read should be happen.
Ah, good. Very good. So, what kind of dependency is this?
Sir, I forgot name, sir.
You forgot the name. Okay, no problem. Thanks, Srikanta. That's all I wanted to hear from you. Okay, thank you. So there is. So what Srikanta has pointed out is that so these two chunks are independent. Okay, so this one and this one, these two blocks are independent. However, within this block, you have dependency here. Okay, so this R1 should be read only after it is being written. Okay, similarly this R2 should be read only after it is written. So basically these two are your flow dependency. Okay, so flow dependencies. So now if you actually execute it in order, what is going to happen is that you have to wait for these two instructions to finish before your R3 instruction, the instruction corresponding to this, right, is going to get executed, because basically your add instruction has to wait until your R1 and R2 are fully loaded. Okay, so now how the pipeline is going to look like? The pipeline is going to look like this. Okay, so first you are going to do the fetch, decode, issue, execute for your uh, load instructions. So here you're assuming that execution takes three cycles. Okay, so similar to what we saw in the earlier slide. Okay, now there are no dependencies for our first instruction and second instruction. Okay, so they're just continuing. However, the third instruction, you see, fetch can happen. Yes, of course, you can go fetch it from your memory, whatever PC is pointing, and then you're decoding it, and you found out that this is an add instruction, and this add instruction is needs data from R1 and R2, so you cannot execute. Okay, you cannot be this cannot be issued to the adder yet, because you need data. Okay, until then it has to stall. and these blank boxes means stall. There is nothing done, you just have to wait. Okay, you're just stalling, and after you get both the results, right? So after your loading is done, then you can issue. Okay, then you will issue it to the adder, and your adder will start executing. Okay, and then this is done. So similarly, your memory, this can be fetched. Okay, and then this also has to suffer the same stalls because of your previous instruction. Okay, now if you calculate, you're going to have these many stalls, all these blanks, right, are the stall cycles. Okay, now if you calculate the effective clock cycles, you're going to consume this much time, right? Like you'll calculate the time from 4 to 20 here. Okay, because you just want to avoid the pipeline filling time and the draining time. Okay, so these two don't make sense, so you're just calculating the time where your effectively your pipeline is working, it's full. So then you have the cycles from 4 to 20. Okay, so which is nothing but 17 clock cycles if you go for your in order issuing. Clear? So this is basically you're just issuing it in order, in the same program order. By that, you will have to incur some stalls because of some dependencies. Okay, you have to wait for the data to be available. After that, you can issue and then execute, and because of this you will have stalls, and you're getting this clock cycle. So now let us take a scenario where you can do a reordered issue. It's the same example: x equals to y plus z, a equals to b times c, but the order in which you are issuing is going to vary. Like what Srikanta has pointed out, right? Those two blocks, if you remember, they are independent. Okay, they don't have any dependency. So what if we reorder them? We are going to reorder them like this. Okay, so first you read memory, you're going to load value of y and z, and then you're also going to load the value b and c. Okay, you're not going to do addition here, but rather you're going to do the second sections loading here itself, because there is no dependency between them. Okay, why to wait? Why should adder wait? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to postpone the addition. Okay, so that you don't waste any time in stalls, but meanwhile your cpu is still working. Okay, your CPU is working on some other instruction. What is that instruction? You're working on the other load instructions here. Okay, so then you will do your add and multiply, and then you will correspondingly do the store. Now what the pipeline is going to look like? It's going to look like this. Okay, of course you can see lesser number of stalls. Okay, God, whatever. Excuse me. Okay, sorry about that. So of course you're going to have lesser number of stalls. It's just how many stalls you have. You have definitely a fewer number of stalls. Now if you calculate the effective pipeline time, it's just going to be from 4 to 14. Again, how are you calculating this? You're calculating it from when the pipeline is full, right? Which means that you're going to start from when your first instruction has started executing and the last instruction has started executing. Okay, so now that is when your pipeline is full. Okay, the first instruction has started execution and your last instruction has also started execution. You're not waiting, you're not calculating the time when the pipeline is getting full, right? The filling time and also the draining time you don't care, because they don't really give the correct picture. Okay, so those two times you will leave, and you will just calculate the time in between. Okay, now if you do this, if you do the reordered execution, what will happen? You only have 11 clock cycles. Again, it starts from 4 but it ends at 14. Okay, so which is effectively only 11 clock cycles compared to previous 17 clock cycles. Okay, so definitely when you have a reordered issue, it is very beneficial. Okay, but it comes at a cost. Somebody has to do the reordering, right? There has to be some intelligence. Somebody has to say, okay, you reorder it this way, and now we are going to see how that will be done in the subsequent topics. Okay, clear so far? Is this clear? Guys, is this clear? Any questions? Okay, I think you guys has, I mean, you need to be a little more interactive. Okay, I don't want to have like a monologue. It's too boring for me also. Okay, so I think we have to start interacting. Okay, all right. Now time for some quiz. Okay, don't get startled by the verbose slide here. Okay, so who is going to answer this? Let's ask Shrikanta. Shrikanta, point to somebody.
1 minute. Maybe Shubham Goyal, sir.
Shubham, huh? Okay, Shubham.
Yes, sir.
You want to answer this?
Fine. Yep. Pipeline timing is measured to in order to avoid startup and training delays. Uh, is it the first option or the start issues to the? No, no, it's not start issues. Oh, it's D option in for start execution to finish the execution.
It's
Option D.
D.
Yep, D.
No, it's not D.
Oh,
It's not D because you don't want the pipeline draining time also. Okay, when the last instruction finishes execution, it is going to be the draining time of the pipeline, right? So you don't want the draining time delay.
okay.
Okay, so it's going to be option C. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Huh? Okay. All right. Thanks, Shubham. Now, just to do a recap on that, I'm just going to show you this diagram once again. So you're just calculating the time from when your pipeline first instruction started first instruction started execution. Okay, so that is this guy, and then the last instruction started execution. You're not waiting for this guy to finish. Okay, this will come under the draining time. So this is the draining time, and this is the filling time. Okay, clear, guys? So this is how we have to calculate the clock cycles when you are I mean in a pipeline. Okay, all right. Thanks, Shubham. So we'll just look at MIPS as an example. MIPS R4000, right? So MIPS is uh, it's a RISC processor. It's a what to say? It's a theoretical I mean a RISC processor that was developed purely for academic purpose. Okay, so one of your reference textbooks, uh, by I mean advanced, I mean yeah, computer architecture, a quantitative approach by Hennessy and Patterson, right? So those two guys, Hennessy and Patterson, when they wrote that book, they thought they have to develop one architecture so that people can understand. So while writing their book, they came up with this architecture called MIPS, and they implemented it. And it's actually this is also commercially available. If you want to buy a MIPS processor, you can actually get a MIPS processor. And it was done by two professors when they wrote a book. Okay, so that's very very interesting to know. And here we are. All right. So here you have an 8-stage pipeline. Okay, and so you divide the stages into first and second. Okay, so what you have is your instruction instruction fetch stage, right? So you have instruction first and then instruction second. Okay, and then here your register file stage, you have register access here, and then you have execute stage. And again for data access, you again have data first and data second. Okay, and the reason for this is that you have you're going to interleave the data access, okay, any memory access into two things. Okay, so you're going to have a read and write, right? So you're going to divide it into first and second stages so that there is no interference. Now because of this, there is no interference between different resources. If somebody wants to read at some time and someone wants to write into memory at the same time, you will do it at two different stages. Okay, so now the pipeline is going to look like this. Okay, you have different stages, and for cpu, for your cpu pipeline, this is your clock cycle. Okay, every single stage, right, instruction first is one clock cycle. However, for your master clock, you're going to consider the entire thing as one clock. Okay, so this entire thing is one clock cycle. However, inside the pipeline, you're going to have you're going to, so it's actually very tricky, right? So you're going to have first half, so this is how your clock cycle is going to look like. Correct, so this is your clocks, correct? Now what you're going to do is, so you're going to divide into first half and second half. So here you will do write, and here you will do a read. Okay, so by this you actually have, you gained more time, right? So this is how your MIPS is designed, MIPS processor is designed. Okay, now we discussed about reordered issuing, right? Now when you have reordered issuing, it means that I need to have a pool of instructions to choose from, isn't it? But your PC, what does PC point to? PC only points to my next instruction, correct? Whatever is my next instruction to be executed, I'm going to fetch that from my memory, correct? With that, how are you going to decide? Who is going to decide whether I can reorder it or not? That will become problem. Okay, so what you have is something called as prefetch buffers. What prefetch buffers do is, you will not only bring that one instruction that is pointed by your PC, but you will also bring in all the subsequent instructions. You will bring the next 10 instructions. Okay, why to every time go to memory and then fetch one instruction? Because most often your programs are all sequential, correct? If you whatever program you're writing, most probably you're going to execute the next instruction, and then after you finish the first one, right? So you will bring in not only this one instruction, but you will bring one chunk of instructions, and then you store it in a buffer, and that is called as a prefetch buffer. Okay, now in this prefetch buffer, there are few types in this. So first one is a sequential buffer. A sequential buffer assumes that you are going to execute the next few instructions in a sequence, and then you're going to just bring in those instructions from memory and put it in your sequential buffer. And there are something called as target buffers. Now target buffers are required because your program is not only sequential, but it it also consists of some branches. Okay, if you think about it, whatever is your complex program, whatever be your complex program, you could be the guru of programming. Okay, but whatever program you write, ultimately if you, it will just boil down to a sequence of instructions. Okay, so you're just going to have one sequence of instructions and some branch instructions. Okay, that's all it's going to have. This branch can actually go this way, or the branch can actually come and merge, it can become a loop. Okay, that's all. Your entire computing story finishes here. Okay, so it's just going to be a sequence of instructions, or it is going to be a branch. Okay, so if you can actually determine these two, you can predict it efficiently, then your your problem is solved. That's all, right? So now for sequential, it's not a problem. Okay, so let us say that so for now we will just leave the looping part. okay, because it's just we can actually, we'll deal with that in a bit. So what you have in a sequence of instructions, you're just going to bring in the next 10 instructions, and then you're going to store it in sequential buffer. But here you're going to have, let us say, a branch. You can either go this way or you can go this way. Okay. So if you don't take the branch, then you're going to continue with your sequential execution. But if you take a branch, you're going to go to a different. So your PC, you have to, at this point, you have to decide whether your PC equals to PC plus 4 or a new PC. You don't know this. Okay, either your PC is just PC plus 4 or your PC can be completely different, right, depending on where you're branching to. New branch address, and that new branch address is called as branch target address. Okay, branch target, and you're going to store in a buffer what are all the possible branch targets I can have. Okay, sequential buffer is just going to store instructions in sequence, but branch target, let us say you have this, right? So you have one more branch like this. You can have PC double star double dash. Okay, so now you have another branch target address. Okay, so now you're going to store branch target address 1, branch target address 2, everything in your target buffer, so that you will know, you don't have to again go to memory, search where that branch target is and bring that instruction. Okay, you already know where you're going to branch. Any questions so far? Okay, there we go. Loop. Then we have loop. Like I said, it's basically, your program is basically your sequential execution and your branching. Okay, loop is just a combination of these two. Okay, so now that is what you have. So you are going to use both sequential and target buffer in a loop. Okay, because what is a loop? Your loop is going to look like this, right? So you're going to have sequential execution, and then the branching takes place back to the sequence. Okay, you're going to continue with the sequence. So this is your sequential execution. You have multiple instructions here. Okay, so you have multiple instructions, and then when you branch, you're branching it back to the sequence. So all you need is sequential buffer and a target buffer. So this will be your branch target address, and here it is just PC, right? PC plus 4, PC plus 4, PC plus 4 here. At this point, either it is PC plus 4 if you're done with the loop, or if not, then you're going to have the branch target address. Okay, so essentially it is still the same. So you can just do well with these two buffers. Okay, target buffer and sequential buffer. Okay, so when you have a fetch unit, then you also have these buffers, and with these buffers, now you can do the reordering. Now you will say, oh, okay, now this is the buffer I have, this is the set of instructions I'm going to deal with. Now let me reorder it. Okay, so you'll do the reordering and then you will issue it to the pipeline. Any questions, guys? Okay, so if not, so I'll let Shubham pick the next person who can answer.
Or Rahul Raj, sir.
Rahul, Rahul Raj. Rahul, please unmute. Okay, next person.
Ujjwal.
Ujjwal. Ujjwal. Ujjwal once. Ujjwal twice. Ujjwal thrice. No. Ujjwal's absent.
Surbi.
Who?
Surbi.
Surbi. Surbi is absent too.
Sindhu J.
Sindhu J. Sindhu J was already absent. I already called her name.
Uh,
Oh my god, they're
Vishal
having a
B.
tough time. Vishal B.
Yes, sir.
Hey Vishal, yeah, let's try to answer this.
Uh,
Which is not part of prefetching.
so I think it's B.
Yeah, correct. So this is not part of prefetching. So only your target buffer, loop buffer, and then your sequential buffer, right? Okay. All right. Okay then. So but basically your loop buffer is also nothing but it's a combination of your target buffer and sequential buffer. Okay. Right. Hey, thanks. Thanks, Vishal. Vishal, right? Yeah. Okay, great. So we'll just move on. Now, there is one inherent problem in pipelining. So if you remember in the previous class, we saw your reservation stations, right? So in your reservation stations, what do you have? You have different stages: stage one, stage two, stage three. Okay, and then different times. Okay, so this is your execution time: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. And then you had a initiation. You had an initiation when your stages are busy. Okay, so it could be something like this. Now if you see your stage 1, right, it is overloaded. Your stage 1 is overloaded with so many things. In first cycle it has to do something, and then third cycle it has to do something, and fifth cycle it has to do something. And because of this one stage, you will actually bring down your minimum average latency. Okay, so that's what we dealt with, right? So you will not be able to have a very good schedule here when you have such kind of uh, what to say initiations, right? A particular stage will become a bottleneck. Okay, so now, so that's a bottleneck stage, and because of this stage the entire performance of your pipeline is going to come down. So now what we are going to do is we are just going to um, make multiple instances of these bottleneck stage. For example, say a simple bottleneck could be your execution stage, where pretty much all the stages will use some kind of adder or shifter, right? So let us pick adder. See, your PC has to do PC equals to PC plus 4, which is part of your fetch unit, isn't it? So as part of fetching, you are still doing your addition, correct? So you'll use your adder unit. Now because of that, even the fetch stage will also use your execution stage resource. Now similarly, there are so many. When you have to calculate the branch target address, then again you'll have to use your adder. So different stages will use the same functional unit, and that will create a particular, I mean, bottleneck for that pipeline, right? So that particular stage will become a bottleneck. So what you're going to do is you're going to divide the pipeline into all subdivisions, and then sometimes you also want to uh, replicate the uh, functional units. For example, in this particular instance, adder, right? So what you will do is you will actually have multiple adders, so that one adder will be part of execution, one adder can be used by someone else for any use, right? So this is how the entire architecture is going to look like. So you're going to have different functional units, multiple instances of functional units. Okay, so now we need to know which functional unit is being used by whom. Now that will become another tracking thing, right? So what you will have is you'll have reservation stations for each functional unit. Each functional unit will have a reservation station saying, okay, this reservation station will track who is using this functional unit and who will be assigned this functional unit later. Okay, so that is what you will track here. And they will, each functional unit will have a tag. Okay, this tag is going to say, it's going to give an identity to the functional unit, and then it is going to say who, I mean, this functional unit dealing with what data. Okay, so what are the registers involved with this functional unit. Okay, so you're going to have a tag unit that is going to track all these activities among these functional units. Okay, now note that you treat your memory also as a functional unit. Okay, now memory will also become a functional unit, and you will have your registers, okay, to track your memory. Okay, so this is how you actually overcome the bottleneck of taxing one particular stage. There is one more way of optimizing your pipeline. Okay, so this is called as internal forwarding, where you will actually kind of short circuit your designs. Don't take it literally. It's not, you're not shorting the circuits, but it's a shortcut is what they mean. It's of two types. So one is store load forwarding, the other one is load forwarding. Okay, it's actually very simple if you think about it. It's actually very obvious too. It just takes common sense to figure this out. Okay, so if you see, you're having two instructions, store and then a load. And this store, what it does, it is storing the value of r1 into memory. Okay, so you're actually storing r1 into memory. Okay, and immediately, or not immediately, subsequently, what you're doing is you're loading the same memory, the data from that same memory location. It's the same memory location. Okay, m. Okay, you can have m is a location 0x8000 something. So the same address you're storing into this address, and then the same, from the same address you're going to load the data into register R2. Okay, now what can be done? Can you optimize this? Of course you can. The common sense is what? You will continue with the store. Okay, you will continue to the store because your memory has to be consistent. Okay, you will do the store here, but when you're going to do the load, you will not access memory. Okay, why do you need memory access here? Okay, that is not required. Instead, what you will do is you will just copy the content from your store. Okay, so from your register r1. Okay, so instead of this, you will use a move instruction. You will not use load, but you actually load the register using a move instruction. You just copy the value of r1 into r2. That's all, right? But who takes care of this? The reservation station. If you see, previously we had several reservation stations, right? So there the tagging unit was tracking which functional unit is doing what. Okay, who deals with this? So somebody, so you will know that this store, okay, so this store has r1. Okay, and then I will inform the other instruction that, hey, don't go for memory. I have a better shortcut for you. Just take it from this guy. Okay. So this reservation station is going to tell you, okay, just pick it up from this R1. Okay. So that is what you do here. Clear? So this is your store load forwarding. The next one is load forwarding. It's exactly the same thing. Okay. What you're going to do, instead of this says you're going to load once from memory, and then from the same memory location you're going to load into another register. Instead of that, what you can do, you can just move again. Okay, instead of again accessing memory. Okay, so here if you take, if you take store, right, this is going to take 3 cycles, this is going to take 3 cycles, but here subsequently what you're going to do is you're just going to take 1 cycle to do this. Okay, so for this load, previously it would have taken 6 cycles. It has to wait 6 cycles for the data to be available, but here you just can do it in 1 cycle. Okay, and similarly for this load, it is going to take, previously it was taking 3, but then you just have to do it in 1 cycle. Okay, now a question for you guys. There is something wrong with this figure. What is wrong with this figure? There is an errata, okay, in your textbook. Let's see how many of you are observant. There is something wrong. Your textbook is wrong. Okay, the figure in your textbook is wrong, and I just want you to just look at this and point what is wrong here. Anyone? At least give an attempt, guys. Basically, your load, right? Load means arrow direction. Shruti, you're the winner. Good. Shruti did it. The arrow direction is wrong here. Okay, it has to be this way. Okay. Hey, great, Shruti. Good observation. Super. So don't actually just take your textbook also for granted. Okay. So you always apply your brain. Okay. Nice. So we look at one more example. Okay. So here we look at this particular example. Summation of I equals to 1 to n ai times bi. Now, when you design an architecture, right? So when you come up with an architecture, you always keep in mind that everything is modular design. Okay. So see, you're not going to build everything from scratch. Okay. So all the designers out there who's actually putting up this process together, they are going to use modular designs, right? So if you take this particular instance, your multiply unit, everything in pipeline, right? It should always be interleaved by registers. Why? Because we were using register or latches, right? If you remember, flip flops or latches in between pipeline stages. That's what your pipeline is all about. Synchronous pipeline is always about two stages interleaved by a register. Correct? Register or it's a flip flop or a latch, right? Now these are two different units. Okay, now these two different units are actually brought together. Okay, so they are in a pipeline now. Logically it's correct, there's nothing wrong with this, but the only problem is that you have R3 and R4 back to back. Okay, so first step, multiply unit has to give you an output and to R3, and R3 is going to give an input to the add unit, which is R4. Okay, so this is the output of multiply and this is the input for your add. Okay, this is just unnecessary cycle waste. So one way to do this forwarding here is that you cannot actually break the architecture, but what you can do is you can actually rewire it, right? So you can just give a connection saying, okay, so let R3 be R3, but then what you're also going to do is you're going to do this part. Okay, instead of this, you're just going to have this. Okay, it's just the wiring part, so that you don't have to break the actual module, but you're just tying them differently. Okay, so with this you have a better design. Okay, so this is another example of your internal data forwarding. Finally, we have something called as hazards. Okay, hazard detection and avoidance. What are hazards? This is something that you already know. Okay, so hazards are something that violates the program order. If in case we violate the program order, so let us say we are doing the reordering, right? Instruction reordering and all. So we are doing the reordering, but if you do the reordering in such a way that it is going to violate the program order and thereby result in incorrect output. Okay, so you're going to get incorrect results because of that, then that is a hazard. Okay, you don't want a hazard, right? Now we will just learn a couple of terminology. So one is called as a domain. Domain is nothing but the input set of instructions. Okay, if you have an instruction, let us say you take an addition instruction, R3 is R1 plus R2. Okay, so the inputs, right? So these two becomes the domain, and R3, right, becomes the range. It is the output. Okay, so domain and range. I think you would have learned this in your discrete maths or something. What are hazards? Hazards are nothing but your read after write, write after read, and write after write hazards. Okay, so these are the different. If you have these dependencies but still don't follow it, then it means you have a data hazard. Okay, and this is your flow dependency. Raw is your flow dependency. A read after write. Okay, and then this is anti dependency, and this is output dependency. Okay, so we'll see about this register renaming. You can actually overcome, these are actually pseudo dependencies. Okay, the actual true dependency is only raw, your read after write. Your var and wow, right, the anti dependence and output dependence are only pseudo dependencies which can be overcome by register renaming. Okay, how do you do that? So what you're going to do is, so this is your read after write, right? So you have your domain and range. So if it a raw hazard, then it means that your your domain, your input, okay, of the read instruction is going to be followed by a write instruction, and this order has to preserve, or order has to be preserved. In other words, you have, so your previous instruction is going to write to one register. Okay, now the subsequent instruction is going to read from the same register. Then if you have the order interchanged, then it will result in a problem. Okay, you're going to read the old data. Okay, so your read should always follow the write of the previous instruction if the register is a common register. If your previous range and the current domain are the same. Okay, now similarly you will have your write after write. So write after write will actually map to the same range, which means you're writing to the same output. Your output is going to be the same, and write after read is going to be the reverse of read after write, right? So you're going to have the uh, you have your subsequent instruction has to write after the read is performed. Okay, so that is your war hazard. Now I said these are only pseudo dependencies, right? So let us see an example. So we will take one example. R1, you have R2 plus R3. Okay, and let us take a war example, right? Your write after read. Okay, so you're reading here, but then you're going to write something here. R2 equals R4 plus R5. You have something like this. Okay, so now what is happening? So you have a dependency here. Okay, so this is your var dependency, but this is not exactly a dependency. Okay, it is just your what to say, the short sightedness of your compiler. Okay, now what I can do is I can just remove this. I will say, hey, don't make this R2, let us call it R6. We will rename it something. It's just the name, right? So any reference to all subsequent instructions, wherever I use R2, 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 I'm going to make it, no, it's not R2, it is R6 for you. Your R2 is doing something else. So somebody is reading R2, but for you, we will rename you to be R6. So now this is a different register altogether. Okay, you can write it to something else also, right? Similarly, your wow hazard also can be overcome with register renaming, but your raw cannot. Okay, raw is a true dependency, and you can only do some reordering or something to overcome that. Okay, or wait for your reservation station. Now these are the necessary but not sufficient conditions for the hazard, which is, yeah, like your domain and range, right? So how they have to be disjoint. Okay, if they are not disjoint, then there is a possibility of raw. it it's not sufficient because it doesn't necessarily create a hazard. There could also be a situation where you have a common domain range, but it may not produce an incorrect result. Okay, it may actually produce a correct result also, you cannot guarantee that, correct? So because of that, it's not a sufficient condition, but it's only a necessary condition for the hazard. Okay, Oh, okay. So now we come to the end of this topic. So let's pick somebody. Shruti, can you point to someone?
So,
Who?
Aliva.
Aliva? Aliva, are you there? Aliva is not here.
Yes,
Hey, Aliva, you're there.
yes, sir.
Hey, yeah. Come on. Let's do this. Match the following. What is raw hazard? Aliva? Aliva, are you there? Aliva is not there. Who else? Shruti?
Shreya.
Shreya?
Any Shreya.
Shreya, are you there? And half the time is going asking where are you there? Are
Sir,
you there?
sorry, sir, I got disconnected.
You got disconnected. Okay, come on. Let's do this now. Aliva, come on. Raw hazard. Is it output dependency, anti dependency, or flow dependency?
Anti-dependency.
No.
War is anti-dependency, sir.
Super. War is anti dependency.
Wow is output dependency.
Oh, nice, man. Okay.
And raw half is no
Has
dependence.
to be, it has to be flow dependency. Okay, very good. Super. Okay, so this one you just have to remember. Okay, so it's called flow dependency because that actually comes with the flow, and the other two, right? So these two are only what to say, pseudo dependencies. Okay, thank you, Aliva, and I think that's all from me, guys. So you guys can give your attendance. If
Okay,
there are
sir.
no more questions, feel free to leave. Thank you.